All right. It's great to see everybody coming in. We're going to give you one more minute just to get folks into the room, and then we'll get started. I think to make sure and have everyone, it looks like we're all doing that, keep your camera off and your mute your mic so we can have the best audio. And I'm going to go ahead and start. So welcome everyone, and happy International Color Day, which was yesterday, but we are celebrating today. I'm Luann Stovall. I'm the host of the Color Literacy Forums and a member of the Color Literacy Project team. In celebration of International Color Day, the Color Literacy Project is kicking off our second forum series titled Color in Context. And before we jump into it, I want to ask you all, invite you to please put your name in the chat box. We'd like to have a hot chat box going. So please put your name in the chat box and let us know where you're from. And that would be, you know, whatever city you're coming from, and also whatever university or where you place of work. So this is all about connecting, and we're very interested in making sure we connect with everybody, and appreciate your interest in what we're doing here with the Color Literacy Project. So this new series follows on the heels of the previous four-part color perception series. You're welcome to visit our website. It's colorliteracy, COLOUR.org, to check out the previous recordings for the previous forums, and also to learn more about the Color Literacy Project. Before we jump in, please make sure we let you know who we know who you are. So we want you to keep your fingers warmed up in the chat box, because like I said, we want to keep that chat box going. And I'm going to let you know before we introduce the topic that we have two speakers today, and we're going to have you ask questions, or any questions you have during each presentation. Please put them in the chat box, and we're not going to address them during the presentation of each speaker, or not immediately after, until both speakers have completed their presentations, and then we're going to definitely address the questions and in our panel discussion, and which is the second half. So with that, colors are enigmatic. We have finely tuned preferences for certain colors, and yet our perception of colors seem highly dependent on their specific context, like the interaction with surrounding colors, the type of materials involved, and the sources of illumination, to name just a few. At the same time, colors can be given precise designations and formulas in colorimetry. But again, our color perception can vary significantly with the spatial, environmental, physiological, psychological, cultural, and historical factors. In this four-part series of Color and Context forums, we will explore how these different contexts can coexist and affect the ways that we perceive colors. We begin our journey today with part one, an introduction to the concepts of identity and ambiguity of colors from the viewpoint of two different perspectives: the philosophy of color and the perception of color, with examples from art and design. In the process, we will explore the corresponding difficulties encountered when we attempt to reconcile objective reality with our subjective perception. The timeline today is, before I introduce our two speakers, we're going to review exactly what's going to happen. So we have 75 minutes long, and we are dividing into two segments. In the first segment, each speaker will give a 20-minute presentation. In the second segment, we will have a moderated panel discussion with the two speakers and the audience. The moderator will be Maggie Maggio, president of the Inter-Society Color Council of the United States, and the chair of the Color Literacy Project. Robin Kingsburg of the Color Literacy Project will be monitoring the chat box. So again, please, we're interested in your questions and your feedback, and put them in the chat box. We'll be watching for those questions and addressing them in our second half when we have our panel discussion. So with that said, I am so delighted to introduce our first speaker in talk 1. The title is The Identity and Ambiguity of Colors from a Philosophical Perspective. So we're welcoming Valtteri Arstila. He's a doctor of philosophy and a full professor in theoretical philosophy at the University of Turku in Finland. His research is on the empirically informed philosophy of mind. In particular, he has been interested in subjective time, the relationship between experiences and cognition, and sensory qualities, especially colors and sound. So with no further ado, let's introduce Valtteri. So hello and welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Luan. Let me just share my screen. There, right. I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you very much for the very kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to give this short introduction to the philosophy of colors. Now, I don't know what are your general views on what do you think that philosophers are doing, but I assume that most of you at least think that philosophers tend to ask some kind of big questions and fundamental questions. And I think mostly that is quite right. And regarding colors or color philosophy, the most central question that there is simply the question like what kind of properties colors are. Now, within philosophy, there are I would say like there are about 10 to 20 different views on what colors are. So I'm not going to go through all of those. Instead, I'm going to introduce you one of the main ways of classifying, actually two ways of classifying what kind of properties colors are according to philosophers, or possibilities. The first and the kind of crudest classification is simply that on the one hand, there's the idea that colors are some properties of physical objects that exist outside of us. So you see my shirt, it's blue. My shirt really is blue. That view is known as color realism. On the other hand, you can also argue that there are no colors in the world, that colors are simply sensations. Colors are something that we experience, but physical world doesn't include any colors. And this view is called color eliminativism. That is the kind of biggest distinction that you can make regarding the views on what kind of properties colors are. In addition to this distinction, color realism is usually divided into two different classes. The first one is color objectivism. Color objectivism maintains that colors are properties of objects that are determined independently of observers' color experiences. And this you see very commonly in the colorimetry and views which say that different wavelengths have different colors. So for example, 540 to 545 nanometer light is green. That is kind of the basic point here is that whatever colors are, there are somehow some objective properties of the world. Now, another possibility regarding like if you still adhere to color realism is to maintain that colors are properties of objects that are defined in relation to the color experience of the observer. For example, there could be dispositions to appear as blue for us or for particular perceiver. One way to think about this is comparing warmness and temperature. Whatever object you have, we can always measure its temperature in objective terms, but at the same time, that one object may appear to us or feel to us or one person as a warm, cold, or let's say lukewarm. And it depends on the situation. Sometimes the very same object, same temperature feels warmish or maybe a bit kind of cool. So this warmness here is kind of subjective property. It is how things appear to us. And color relativism or relational theory of color maintains that colors are such properties similar to like what warmness is. They are not temperature, they are not objective properties, they are how things appear to us. So that's basically the those three that I'm going to mention classifications like color objectivism, color relativism, and color elementativism are the ones that I'm going to talk about, mainly focusing on color objectivism. And the reason why I'm focusing on that is that when you are listening what people say about colors, they basically, the way they speak about colors implies some kind of color realism and especially color objectivism. So for example, when you are having discussion with your friends, quite often at least, we tend to accept, for example, these five following claims. First, that colors are, in this case, surface properties of physical objects external to us. So they accept color realism. They also argue, well, many maintain that the fact that surface is green sometimes explains our experience as of green things. So there is some property in the object, namely it is green, and that explains why we experience that as a green. Third claim, we are justified in believing that something is green based on our experiences. If you see my shirt as blue, quite commonly you also think that you are justified in believing that my shirt is blue, just based on this perceptual experience. And kind of corollary to this claim is that we can identify the color of an object based on our experiences. Moreover, there are paradigmatic examples of certain things. For example, grass is commonly considered to be green, and every time when we talk about grass, we have this view that, or belief that what we are talking about has property, and that property is green. So this is kind of quite typically related to color objectivism. And finally, there's a claim that whatever our experience kind of reveals the intrinsic nature of colors, intrinsic nature of green as of green thing. These five theses or claims are usually like best explained, or it is thought that they are best explained by color objectivism. Although all of them can be also challenged, I will today only discuss the claim 3 and claim 5, so identity or justification and revelation. And I will start with the revelation, the intuition of revelation, or claim about revelation, because that's, I assume, something that you are less familiar with. Now, when philosophers are discussing or considering what the colors are, they are quite often, they draw from empirical literature. And in this case, and also the kind of examples that I'm using, I'm appealing to psychophysical studies. Psychophysical studies, well, psychophysics in itself is a branch of psychology that deals with the relationship between physical stimuli and sensations that they produce. So very simply, you take I don't know, bunch of people, 100, 200 people, you show them different kind of stimuli, and then you ask their responses. Did you see red? Did you see blue? Name that color. What colors are more similar to each other than others, and so forth. A lot of different tasks, a lot of different stimuli, and then you have some kind of view how physical stimuli and reports that people give relate to each other. And in these kind of studies, one of the kind of central result is that colors have a unique binary hue structure. So there is a kind of, whatever colors we see, they have structure, namely that some colors are unique hues or unique colors, and some are binary. Unique hues are hues that are experienced as pure and cannot be described as a mixture of other colors. And here on the right side, you have a picture. If you look at the blue, for example, and you try to describe the color blue for other people, it is quite obvious that you cannot describe the color of you in terms of, let's say, green or red. It's similar with red. There's nothing in the red that is somehow a bit kind of tilted to blue or yellow, so that you could describe redness in terms of blue and yellow. So that's why they call it unique hues. They are pure hues. They are something that, in our experience, appear as somehow pure. The basic point is that the important point to notice here is that this is really about how we experience colors. It's not about mixing pigments, mixing lights. It is about our experiences. It's kind of sensations that we have when we are looking at colored objects. In contrast, binary hues are something that are experienced or can be considered as mixture of two unique hues, such as orange being a mix of red and yellow. I started this presentation with color purple, and if you think about purple, or if you think of this color circle that you see on the right side, purple there, it is kind of a bit kind of mixture of red. It has kind of hint of redness, hint of blueness. So there's a way of describing purple as being a mixture of red and blue. And that's why purple, orange, and so forth, they are considered as binary hues in this literature. Now, how does this relate to color philosophy? Namely, the first, yes, the received view is that based on the psychophysics, colors have unique binary hue structure. But now when we are looking at the kind of objective properties of physical objects, so here we have, for example, surface spectral reflectances of different objects. So basically these graphs show, like if you look at let's see, that one there, the orange, it shows how much of different wavelengths or an orange surface reflects. And if you look at that, there's nothing like, of course, like orange looks different than yellow and red, for example, because they reflect different wavelengths of different rate. But at the same time, or ratio, but at the same time, nothing in the surface spectral reflectance of orange shows that it is a binary hue. There's kind of no two distinct surface spectral reflectances that, as a combined, would make it look like as an orange surface spectral reflectance. So at the level of physical properties, there's no unique and binary hue distinction. And obviously, kind of the argument that people and philosophers have advanced is that structural properties of these kind of external physical properties, namely how well different wavelengths are reflected, do not match the structural properties of colors. Hence, external physical properties cannot be colors, and color objectivism is challenged. That's one of the claims, revelation claim. Now, the second claim, to kind of remind you, everybody, was that we are justified in believing that something is green based on our experiences. And the corollary claim that we can identify the color of an object based on our experiences. And again, that is somehow, I would say, like common sense view. Many people think that. But in a way, like that already came up in Luan's introduction, there's a problem. And namely, the problem is that our color perceptions vary considerably, and the color of an object cannot be defined in any kind of non-arbitrary manner. To some extent, I think this might be a bit difficult to accept. I mean, especially like how much color perceptions vary. So for that reason, I thought that I would show you one example. And this example concerns the question like what wavelength is a unique or pure green. So I just introduced the notion of unique green, and the question is that you show in a psychophysical study, the question is that you show people a lot of different wavelengths, and then you ask like which one of these wavelengths is a unique green. And to some extent, kind of surprisingly, the range of unique green reports is huge. Mainly, like it is about 60 to 70 nanometers, which is about 18 to 23% of the human visible spectrum. So for all the wavelengths that we can perceive, unique green kind of varies so much that it covers 18 to 23% of the normal of the human visible spectrum. And mind you, these results concern people who have clinically normal color perception. So they don't have color vision deficits. They are not red-green colorblind or blue-yellow colorblind. These are people who are clinically have normal color perception, but at the same time, the wavelength that they identify as unique green varies considerably. So just like here on the right side, you see a table, and it basically just says that if you look at the right side, the range of unique green reports varies anything from 16 nanometers to 74 nanometers. And the 16 nanometers is just with 4 observers. If you have more observers, it is usually between that 60 and 70 nanometers. Now, one obvious problem that comes up here is, of course, that one person's turquoise, for example, is another one's yellow-green. So it's unclear, like, which one of them is correct. Like, should we really, like, if I say that something is turquoise and you say that it's yellow-green, it's unclear which one of us then perceives the color correctly and which is the color of the wavelength. But actually, the problem is even worse than this. Namely, if you look at the details of these studies, this is from Warburg and not the kind of task that Guani is reporting there, but another task there. You see in this graph all the individual or kind of compiled individual responses in one certain situation. You have unique green, and on the x-axis you have different wavelengths, and on the y-axis you have the frequency that people report that this particular wavelength is unique green. And the most responses for the unique green gets something like 516 nanometers. So about 12, if you have 100 observers, here is the number, and 12 or 13 of those report that this wavelength is a unique green. What that means in practice, or in concrete terms, is that however we define unique green, whatever wavelength we choose as being unique green, 80 or 90% of normal color perceivers will misperceive it. So basically, every time we are seeing some color, we are misperceiving its color. And at least one thing that we can kind of conclude from this is that our experiences do not provide justified reasons to regard something as green. I have not discussed about the kind of this is just like variation among observers. Another additional problem is that we don't know how to define proper observing conditions. This is something that Harald's presentation will touch quickly or shortly. But if you look at the table at the right side, we have different means there for different kind of settings, anything from 5 nanometers to 544 nanometers, which simply shows that these people who did these studies, they use different kind of observing conditions. And again, it makes difficult to say which one of the means even would represent unique green. So basic point is that if we want to define some color, some wavelength as a unique green, it's basically this arbitrary decision because we have to define, like most people would simply perceive that incorrectly. To wrap up quickly, getting back to the early part of my talk, how to define identity conditions for objects, like what is the color of an object? Color objectivism maintained that colors are properties of objects that are determined independently of observers' color experiences. I've now discussed two problems with that, namely that colors would not, well, in this case, colors do not correspond with our conception of color, namely intrinsic nature of colors. And also the color of an object would be defined arbitrarily, and as most people would not see colors correctly. So these are problems why many have tend to more find subjective use of color more plausible. And one option there is color relativism, that colors are properties of objects that are defined in relation to the color experience of observers. Good thing about this is that yes, colors can have unique binary use structure because we define what colors are in terms of our experiences, which have that structure. And we can also define colors. My shirt looks blue because it appears blue to you, or is blue because it appears to you blue as to you. Now, the downside of this view for many is that objects would have lots of colors, one color for each person in all possible observing situations. So this is blue number 72 for me, this is blue 53 for you, and in different observing conditions or situations, it would have different blueness. So objects would not have any kind of fixed colors that we can identify with. Again, some agree with this, but some think that this is too much to accept. And then they are turn to color eliminativism. And I would say like a lot of vision scientists do believe that external objects are not colored, that colors are mainly just like some kind of sensations. Of course, the downside there is that this position does not correspond to our conception of colors as properties of objects. So what we basically have is we have three different classes of theories of color. None of them suitably provide us means to identify, like to say what color an object is. And that is the basic structure of the debate of colors in the philosophy of, well, in philosophy of colors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valtteri. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I actually see your shirt as more gray than blue.
Okay.
We have a lot to talk about, so appreciate that. And we are moving to our second talk, which is called Colors Are Contextual. Would like to introduce to you Harald Arnkil. Harald is a Finnish artist, writer, and color researcher, and member of the Color Literacy Project team. He has published many research papers and is the author of Colors in the Visual World, a textbook, an excellent textbook for artists, designers, and architects. Harald has taught art and color studies at Aalto University School of Arts, Design, and Architecture for 30 years, and is currently working on a doctoral thesis on color in contemporary art. Harald, the floor is yours. Welcome. Harald, your mic is off, and we would like to see your camera and you if possible.
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Luan. I had to technically set up my show because I'm using the notes.
Perfect.
Notes on my presentation. So just a moment.
I know we were working through just exactly how to get that presentation view the way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
So are you?
Yes.
You seeing my?
Yes, Harald, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
can you enlarge it? Enlarge it.
Oh, hang on a minute. Enlarge it. Are you seeing it full screen now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, yeah, it's enlarged.
Okay, great.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you, Valtteri, for your interesting talk. I think I just launched straight into my claim that colors are always contextual, and I would maintain that okay, maybe there are that objects can have lots of different colors, but I have a slightly different meaning for that claim. First of all, I think we need to pause for a while to think about why we have color vision and what we have it for. I mean, what has color vision evolved for in animals, and particularly in our case, in humans? This quote from Valtteri, the psychologist, from the late part of the 19th century, I think is important to think about. He says to see is not so much about looking at waves of light, but about looking at external objects mediated by these waves. The task of the eye is to enlighten us, not so much about the intensity or quality of the light reaching us from some object at a given moment, but about the object itself. And this, I think, was so kind of as a response to sort of objectivist theories about color being able to be understood in terms of radiation or wavelengths of light, or being able to that colors could be reduced to such wavelengths or wavelength patterns, spectral power distributions, and so on. But colors are contextual. They cannot be reduced to any wavelength patterns. In fact, without context, there is no color. The context is not something outside of ourselves. It is created in us, in our perception and conception of a chaotic world. Science is an attempt to contextualize and organize the chaos. But before that is our pre-theoretical experience of the world. Every species of animal, every organism has evolved to make sense of the chaos in a way that serves best the survival, well-being, and continuation of that species. The most fundamental context is the spatio-temporal context. The etymological root of chaos is the Greek word chaos, meaning abyss, that which gapes wide open, that which is vast and empty. I will not go further into this philosophical abyss now, but will give a practical example. The most fundamental and simple context is that of contrast with surroundings. If the eye is subjected to a single color which evenly covers the eye's entire field of vision, forming a so-called Ganzfeld, which is extremely difficult to achieve, by the way. You're not gazing at a Ganzfeld now. This is just a tiny portion of your field of view, field of vision. If your eyes were completely flooded with a single color, this can be achieved by special goggles that you can get, these Ganzfeld goggles, or imagine two halves of a ping pong ball on each eye, and then let's say red light being projected onto your eyes, then you would probably have a Ganzfeld. Or if you stick your head into a sphere which is lit outside absolutely evenly with one color, then you experience a Ganzfeld. Or if you're in a very dense fog, that's a kind of Ganzfeld too. Anyway, with that experience, the color of the Ganzfeld, however saturated it is, disappears within seconds, changing to an unnameable brain gray-like colorlessness, a kind of chaos, in other words. Simultaneous contrast or color induction pertains to the tendency of colors to change in hue, saturation, or lightness, or all three in juxtaposition with other colors. This phenomenon led Joseph Albers to declare on the first page of an interaction of color that in visual perception a color is almost never seen as it really is, as it physically is. This fact makes color the most relative medium in art, unquote. Let's pause there for a while. Color is almost never seen as it really is, as it physically is. So according to Albers, color has a kind of hidden real identity which reveals itself only rarely. At other times, it continually deceives us. Here are some examples that are familiar to anybody of you who've studied Albers's interaction of color. Are these cross forms the same color or are they different? These X's. Or what about the central patches in this image? To me, at least, the patch on the left looks a little bit like the background of on the right, so it couldn't be the same color as the patch on the right. And in fact, I made a kind of proof here to prove that they are physically the same. But does this prove that the patches are actually identical in color, but only physically? Here's another conundrum. Are the two central patches the same color or different colors? Rather difficult to say. Well, in this case, they were actually different. Here, the same patches were switched to their opposite backgrounds. Albers's examples highlight the question of what is color. When Albers says color is color as it physically is, he means the stimulus for color, the painted or printed surface, or in this case, the light from the RGB phosphors on your computer screen. Although we, in everyday language, often call color stimuli, such as paints and colored surfaces, colors, they are really only potential causes of color. I will not go any deeper into the epistemology of this, but let it be said at this point that there is no condition which is truer than any other for seeing a color as it really is, and certainly not as it physically is, because there is no such thing as physical color. Simultaneous contrast is a real issue in painting or any other task where colors are juxtaposed on a flat surface. Interestingly, though, it is very rarely present or consciously perceived in spatial contexts. Albers was spot on when he urged his reader to be alert to these color changes and to, quote, think in situations. But flat, motionless images are either abstract symbols or abstractions of our spatio-temporal world. Color is, among other things, information, and our vision has evolved to extract information about a three-dimensional and spatio-temporal world, and not so much about flat symbols and abstract patterns. Look at the red disk of the setting sun in this painting by Claude Monet. Its fiery glow is entirely due to the spatial context, the pictorial context, so to speak. If I change the pictorial context and keep the disk of the sun the same as the same stimulus physically, see what happens. The sun is not the same sun anymore. Or here. Now it's almost extinguished. It's like almost like an object, just a non an unincandescent object. So we live in a dynamic spatial world in which colors and their relationships are given to us in that context. Whatever we happen to think about the relationship between colors and so-called physical world or physical reality, colors for us humans are not abstract entities or metaphysical ideas, but real perceptions and experiences. Colors are always perceived as modulated by space and light, even in the most abstract presentations. Colors are as part of our spatiotemporal reality, our life world. The tone, in other words, the warmth, coolness, the dominant hue of illumination can vary in innumerable ways due to its endless variability of spectral composition. Illumination creates shadows, light, highlights, reflections, and glare, which modulate how colors are perceived. Or rather, these effects are inseparable from our normal perception of colors. Problems arise only when we begin to regard colors out of context, in isolation, as belonging nowhere. Illumination has a big effect on how we perceive colors, or rather, it is an inseparable part of colors and the visuality of our spatiotemporal reality, and the reality of all seeing animals. Where there are colors, there is also illumination, and vice versa. Light makes seeing and colors possible, but light is not the same as color, and neither can colors be reduced to wavelengths of light. Neither is pigment or other coloring material same as color. Colorants are potential stimuli for colors. Colors are what we perceive and experience in reaction to the interrelation of light, the optic array of stimuli, and our visual apparatus, the eye-brain-body apparatus. Our present type of trichromatic vision has evolved over millions of years to be adapted to this dynamic spatiotemporality. We are able to recognize the colors of objects in almost any kind of natural illumination, from morning to evening, and in shadow and in bright light. Here you see some standard illuminants and their which are defined by the CIE, and their spectral power distributions, evening sunlight, noon daylight, and north skylight. As you can see, throughout the day, the spectral composition changes enormously, and we can recognize colors fairly well, very well indeed, actually, in all these illuminations. The only thing that changes is the kind of atmosphere or tone of the whole scene. More spectral curves, for example, if you look at this is a kind of disappearing technology, of course, now, this incandescent light, which has a spectral curve where it sharply rises at the red end, the orange red end, and compared with north skylight or D65 daylight, or kind of, if you have a really good fluorescent tube, you would have that kind of spectral curve coming from that sort of illuminant, and the objects will look colored the same in all of these illuminations. Also, these kind of spectral distributions would give the same colors for the same objects, or these. Very dramatically different kinds of compositions of light, so to say, compositions of wavelengths, will not alter our perception of colors so much, at least in relation to those enormous changes in the spectral composition. Now, have you ever wondered how the moon can be really bright when it shines from a cloudless sky at night? It can be almost dazzling. The sun's rays bounce from the spherical dust-covered surface of the moon and hit your eyes here on Earth. And sometimes the moon is visible in daytime. And then it is always pale and without luster, never bright. But photometrically, its luminance is the same as that of the nighttime moon. There are two reasons for the dramatic difference of appearance. First, at night, we are adapted to low levels of luminance, and our eyes can be hundreds of times more sensitive to light. And secondly, the disk of the moon is surrounded by darkness at night and by brightness in the day. So giving a kind of simultaneous contrast effect as well. Okay, I'll rush on because we're running out of time. But obviously, I mean, our sensitivity to levels of brightness can vary enormously, and the conditions for adjusting to those to those different illuminations vary enormously, not just hundreds or thousands of times, but billions of times. In terms of kind of luminescence where we can actually see in starlight, it's 0.0003 candela per square meter, and in photopic conditions, if you're on a brightly lit sunny beach, for example, the sun there can be 100 million lumens bouncing off the sea, and still we're able to adapt to it. But it takes time. I mean, it doesn't happen just like that. Up to half an hour to accommodate to total darkness. When the eye becomes 500 times or so more sensitive to compared with daylight vision. Now, modern color meters are fantastic devices, and a spectrometer can provide data about the tiniest color differences and potential mismatches due to metamerism. But this data is totally non-spatial and atemporal. The meter does not know where it is, in what kind of illumination it is, or which colors surround it, or surround its target, rather. So-called color measurements, be they based on quantification of spectral radiation or your visual methods, are only able to inform us of whether a patch of color matches another patch or sample of color. To be more precise, whether a certain color stimulus matches the specifications for a color in a given system's color space. It does not tell us what that color is, only its relation to the coordinates of the given color system. We can discuss perhaps afterwards why that is so, but there is no spectrometric measurement device or color system that can actually give us the color that is given to us in experience, in perception. The same applies to visual measuring devices such as Mansell or NCS and RAL. Many times the challenge facing the designer is that of fitting together or translating between non-spatial quantitative color designations and the real spatio-temporal world. These challenges can be overcome by being conscious of the difference between the quantitative methods of measurement and the more holistic methods of visual assessment and analysis, and by intelligently combining the two methods or combining several methods. And I should say here that those measuring devices, color measurement, colorimetry, and so on, of course, apart from not being able to relate those isolated, non-spatial, non-temporal color measurements to their surroundings and to their time, their location, to the surrounding colors, they also do not take into consideration the flexibility of human color vision, how it adapts and how it achieves, for example, how it achieves color constancy, and so on. So
2 minutes.
okay, thanks. So there are multiple external and internal factors which affect color perception. Illumination, adaptation, mode of attention, time and movement, our intentions and expectations, and the spatial context, which we're concentrating on now. There is an increasing need in industry, commerce, and design for measuring and designating colors accurately. Both physical and visual measurement tools and methods have been developed to answer these needs. While these tools have attained a remarkably high degree of accuracy, one challenge remains: relating the measuring data or the visual sample of a color to the human experience of that color in real life, or in a specific context of real life. This is no easy task, and therefore it is important to differentiate between these methods and tools. I was involved in a Nordic research project on color, space, and light, a project called Synthese, where about 10 years ago. And there we developed methods and concepts for trying to fit together these different approaches to color, the scientific, the practical, and the perceptual, and the artistic, and the holistic. And we came up with these. Some of these were actually already in literature, but we came up with some new kind of concepts and terms for these, for inherent color, nominal color, identity color, and constancy color. I'm going to run out of time explaining what they actually pertain to, but I'll show you one particular slide to finish off with. This is from Karin Friedel-Anter, the leader of that Synthese project, this research project, and her description of what affects the perceived color. First, you have the nominal color, which can be kind of identified with one of those measuring devices, or especially for example with NCS color samples or Mansell samples or whatever. And then all these different conditions and effects and factors affect the way we see that color, and the perception of the color, which is the color, can change whenever one of those or more, or two or more, or one or more of those conditions or factors change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harald. And it's a round of applause for you if you're hearing the sound of many hands clapping here. Thank you to you and to Valtteri for your excellent and provocative presentations. I know I have a lot of questions, so we are excited to. And this book, by the way, is a marvelous book. So I would urge you all, if you don't have it, to put it, bring it, get it in for your library. It's excellent. So we are moving to our panel discussion now. We are highlighting the cameras of our two speakers, Valtteri and Harald, and also of our moderator for the panel discussion, that's Maggie Maggio. Maggie is the president of the Inter-Society Color Council, that's in the United States, and also bring up the camera of Robin Kingsburg. Robin is the president of the Color Research Society of Canada, and she'll be monitoring the chat box. So just again, so you all know, we are very, very interested. We're doing the forums to connect everyone. We're so interested to have you here with us. So please put your comments and questions in the chat box. Robin will be watching for those and working with Maggie, and Maggie will be talking, of course, with our speakers as well. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Maggie, and thank you again to our speakers.
Yeah. Thank you, Luann. All right. Well, I do have questions for each of you. First of all, I want to thank you both for being here today, and I really appreciate, Valtteri, your explanation of the different approaches in philosophy to this topic of color. And I understand you are personally an illuminativist. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. Yes.
Yes. And so how I understand that is that from your perspective, color exists in our mind, in our brain, and everything else is context. Is that right?
Yes, you could say that. Yes. Yes. So
Okay.
so for me, just like quickly, for me, the kind of question is that is like I'm taking kind of experience first approach, which means that I'm really, the way I approach colors is how I experience colors, and then I would like to have some kind of match between my experience and the properties in physical world. And if I cannot do that match, and I think I cannot do that, it means that I cannot reduce my color experiences to external world. So it is really just like in different contexts, I have different kind of experience, and that's why what matters for me regarding colors is my experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Harald, you used the term spatiotemporal. Am I getting that right? As the world that we live in and how we perceive color is all based in that spatial temporal environment. And so you're saying our experience of color then is, again, it's all about the context, and it includes all those factors as you mentioned in that last slide. And so main question I have is that, do you think that you are both in the same place in terms of this philosophy of color?
Well, I'm not a philosopher. I'm an artist interested in philosophy. So I would like to abstain from taking a philosophical stand or a final philosophical stand. All I can say is that I find phenomenology attractive in explaining two things. One, how our experiences of color are really the real colors. And the other is because as Valtteri very, very forcefully brought forward, that we seem to kind of all experience the colors differently, that we seem to have kind of even private optical or private perceptual experience or perceptions of colors. Then there's this big question, this big kind of question mark floating over my head. Do we share any of these experiences? I mean, why do we bother making these very, very finely divided, nuanced decisions about colors? And myself, I as a painter, as an artist, I would like to think that I'm communicating important things like feelings, ideas through the colors. They are very important factors in the paintings. Now, if everybody sees them differently, then are we all in kind of in a different world? So for this phenomenology, for this problem of intersubjectivity, it provides some clues, I think, some sort of consolation about this. But it's very complicated, and I don't think we have the time to go into that tonight.
Yeah.
Can I have
go ahead.
Yeah,
Valtteri.
Yeah. From philosopher's perspective, I think what Harald has been saying is mostly that he's endorsing color eliminativism. but at the same time, he does once in a while always kind of use the terms which gives the impression that he might be some kind of color realist. Namely, like in the last slide, he's talking about environment having surrounding colors. So that is kind of attributing colors to external world. He starts with the Albers, who says that there are physical, that somehow colors are physical. So I think like this once in a while in Harald, he gives the impression that he would like to be some kind of color realist. At the same time, he is, I would classify him as a color eliminativist if I would have to.
Okay.
What, just out of curiosity, what would you have called Albert? A relativist?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I think that I would. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's the crux of what we're talking about today, and that is our perception of color or our sensation of color is considered to be different things by different people. Different, what is the reality of color then? And so as our audience is probably, made up of people from both, the science side, the art side, the design side, everything else, we wanted to invite you to put your questions in, and we can ask, Valtteri and Harald some of your questions, as well as, what we might have come up with. So, Robin, are there any questions in the chat?
Yep, there are a couple questions from Dave Weibly to Valtteri regarding your final statement on eliminativism, that it does not correspond to our perception that objects are colored. If this is the case, then why are we not confused when the color of an object changes under different viewing conditions?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure, like, whether actually we are or whether we are not. I think that also depends partially on how familiar people are in paying attention to colors. Harald was talking quite a lot, like, I don't think not so much in explicit terms, but color constancy, that a lot of what for one person, same object looks quite the same in various different observing conditions, especially in illumination. So it is kind of like when you go and buy, like this, what example that I use once in a while. If I go and buy a blue jeans on a store, I am kind of expecting them to appear to me blue also when I go outside, and they do look blue. Just that I'm not always necessarily sensitive on that they look a bit kind of tinted a bit differently, but sometimes there is a kind of big difference, and then I am indeed surprised that that the object appears to have very different color than I assumed that to be. So I think people are sometimes surprised, sometimes they are not surprised, because they are more, the object appears to have a somewhat similar color in different observing conditions for one person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Harald, did you want to say anything about?
No, I was just, in answer to Dave, I don't think Valtteri denies that there are kind of that objects and surfaces have different physical qualities, different maybe even microstructures and so on, which might affect, which potentially affect the way we as eliminativists would say project colors onto them. That there's a reason for things becoming colored so in a certain way. It's not haphazard. It's not just chaotic. And I was talking about chaos and the mind of the observer kind of organizing that chaos. So there's an evolutionary and ecological reason for us seeing the colors there out in the world, even though we cannot reduce our experiences, our color experiences, to the physical properties of the surfaces and objects. And when one of the physical properties interacting or in between the object and us is light, of course, and it's always there, as I said. And if it changes, the spectral power distribution changes. The light reaching our eyes has a different spectral power distribution when we step from the for example, the shop where you bought the jeans and you go outside, or you go home where there's a different light. You have a different pattern of spectral power distribution, and indeed the jeans might look a little bit maybe grayer or greener or whatever than they did in the shop, and that's a real that's a real occurrence. It's not haphazard. It's not chaotic. That the mind or the observer, the viewer, is trying to kind of keep it the same. Is trying to maintain color constancy, but there are of course limits to how far we're able to adapt. So you're not adapting to real colors, perhaps, as an eliminativistic view. You are adapting to something else, something in the physical world. But for me, I kind of take the phenomenological view that, okay, the jeans are blue, and then the conditions change, and I see them differently.
Harald,
But yeah,
you just said the jeans are blue.
yeah. Phenomenologically, they are blue. They are.
Phenomenologically.
Yes. Phenomenologically speaking, they are blue. That is my experience. But now this is important, actually. If I were talking to a bunch of, I don't know, chemical engineers or lighting designers or what, I would of course make the distinctions that the genes are, that the blue is not in the genes. It's in my perception, and that there are certain conditions for that stimulus to create the perception in me, and so on, so forth. But if I'm talking artistically, phenomenologically, philosophically in a way, then I can say that the genes are blue, and I can say that I have red paint here, and I'm transferring the red paint to the canvas and using red color. Do you understand? This is a way of speaking. It's metaphorical. We use
okay, there we go.
We use metaphors all the time. Our speech is full of them. So we are not machines. We don't produce kind of exact simulacra of the physical world. We speak metaphorically.
So I think this is an important point. I think in the language of color, it's all metaphor.
Yes.
In terms of how we refer to color, because to try to describe it the way we're doing here, this, the philosophy of color, it's a mental construct, whatever, however we want to talk about sensation and perception in our daily lives, the language makes this infers that there are material properties that color is physical. And so, how does this impact in our life and everything else? We don't really discriminate colors based on our environment. We have all of this and kind of inherent understanding that when the lighting changes, the color didn't change. Even though it appears to. So how do you go through the world with this understanding that we have this sense of color and there's no materiality to it?
Well, I sometimes wondered why colors are such a problem. What about everything else? I mean, is there materiality to many of our other experiences and sensations? I mean, Valtteri, you mentioned heat that can be measured.
There's also a follow-up question from Dave in the chat, looking at other senses. So associating, a note to a trumpet, for example, or, chocolate cake. We talk about chocolate cake sitting on a table. I tell my students it has no taste. The taste happens as a sensation but we still call it chocolate cake. We don't necessarily say chocolate tasting cake.
Exactly. Yeah, and even different aspects of vision. What about, size, distance, position, speed of movement? Those could also be absolutely completely subjective, and often are. But you Valtteri, you have studied time, experience of time.
Well, the time is very already like on a kind of separate bag of issues. Like let's go to that. But regarding the other senses, well, first of all, I would say that speed and size, they are not necessarily subjective in a sense, because there is something that we can objectively measure. What is the size of things, and we can also make predictions on what good predictions on what is the size that people see, how that people experience things to be. But now regarding David's question on different senses, there is some discussion, not that much on sound perception, but there are positions which are kind of sound relativist positions. There are sound objectivist positions, and there are a few, very few, but still there are a few maybe recent more sound eliminativist type of positions. So you have the same debate there, but because sounds are in different way very complicated, I don't think that that would help us. In olfaction, of all the sensory systems that we have, olfaction is possibly the most plastic. Basically, just like different kind of chemicals you smell will change people's receptors in a way, and some die, some come, new ones come, that most people really do not have at all. It's a similar olfaction, and because olfaction also influences on how we taste chocolate cake. Yes, we do call it chocolate cake because it is done from chocolate, but not because it necessarily tastes objectively chocolate to all people. So, but same debate there too.
Mm.
Yeah. So that all comes under the heading of we should be talking about color as a visual perception. It is a part of our visual sense. Okay, so there was a good summary. I think maybe this is Jim Leonard. I'll read off what he said. Is this a fair way to express the ideas? An object has a particular and reasonably constant reflectance property, but the stimuli produced is a function of many additional factors, such as illumination. But the color, in quotes, is the perception in the human mind, including all the context aspects. That's his. That's fair. Yeah.
I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. The main issue there is that some people still want to fix colors. If we fix all the context, then we can say that surface reflectance is color. Whereas some others say that it doesn't make sense to say something that something is a color if really what matters is the context. Even like very simple thing that we didn't come to. Like I think that I mentioned this to Harald at one point. The size of the stimuli matters enormously. So very small very small stimuli can look bluish, and then if you lower some greenish, or actually green, and then if you increase the same size, like same properties except the size, then it will look red.
Wow.
So it doesn't. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily make sense we have to identify
the blue can look
so
red.
detailed that it doesn't make sense to call something surface reflectance as a particular color.
No, the green can look red, is what Valtteri is. is
Well,
claiming.
I would say like the stimuli that appears for a person first as a green can appear to that person as red, depending on the size of the stimuli.
You mean the kind of
So
you mean the spatial angle?
there's a little bit of break.
I mean that if let's say that if you take certain you take a certain light source, and if the light source is very small, exactly the same wavelength. If it's small, it looks one color. If you increase the light source, but the aperture, then it looks opposite color.
Is that something
Is
to
there
do
a
with
surround?
Sorry, no, it's not about surround. It is about the fact that of the kind of it is a fact about the how the cones are divided in our retina.
Yeah.
So just basic kind of photos, like the very basic level of kind of wavelength, sorry, not photon processing in the retina.
Okay.
I'd like to.
There is a.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'd like to just bring up one more kind of thought that I didn't have time for in the speech, but in my talk, that we can always also think about the spatiality of colors in terms of you could think of it as layers of perception, so that we have different modes of perceiving objects and perceiving colors. For example, just imagine some kind of scene with shadows. So the scene is overlaid partly with shadows. A wall, for example, with an uneven distribution of shadows across it. You perceive or apprehend the color of the wall. Let's say that it's yellow. You apprehend the yellow color, even though you've never been in the room before. You don't know who's painted it. I mean, it could have been painted, for example, in a patchy fashion, but you apprehend the illumination, the lighting, and the shadows and the light. And you don't kind of see dark yellow and light yellow, dark yellow and light. You see yellow, and then you see the shadows across it. So you're able to pass the layers of a scene into different levels, and it doesn't stop there, because there are many other levels to color. I talked about the constancy color and the other levels of color that we can perceive. But this is all contextual. It doesn't happen out of context. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we want to sum up. We've run out of time.
Yeah.
Luann, you want to mention, that this topic of context is huge, and this is why we have a series. So Luann.
Yes, well, I was going to say, well, I'm glad we figured everything out today. And as you can see, it's a fascinating topic, and I think just one of the most exciting areas that we can really look at, and I'm so glad we're all here together doing that. So yes, thank you so much to our excellent speakers today. Very good conversation and excellent thoughts that you have brought up for us, and thank you also to our moderators for our panel discussion. So with that, and also I want to make sure and thank everyone who's here with us today at the forum. We invite you to stay tuned, since we actually have a lot more to explore. We're planning to have our second forum in June, and it's a series of 4. So it's forum number 3 and forum number 4 will be in the fall. So please stay tuned. And in the meantime, check out our website, colorliteracy.com, and you can see that, we're in the process of just unfolding the subject, and as we think about color as a meta discipline and explore 21st century color. So have a happy International Color Day week, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you all.